Good evening, one and all. My name is Dhiraj Dhirwani, pursuing MMS Finance from VESIM School, and I am serving as the moderator for today's panel discussion. The theme of today's panel discussion is the impact of COVID 19 on the global supply chain. If we focus on this pandemic, I am sure all will agree with me that it happened faster than anyone could imagine. As China sent workers home and shuttered businesses in January 2020 to contain the coronavirus outbreak, the steady flow of vital parts to global supply chains slowed down or stopped. This unexpected disruption sent shockwaves through boardrooms around the globe. Just as the COVID 19 pandemic began to spread, manufacturers in critical industries scrambled to find alternative suppliers to keep factories running. Now, as some regions have moved past the most acute phase of this pandemic and have started to plan for recovery, the leadership teams are taking a hard look on the supply chains as a reliability and risk. The COVID 19 outbreak is not an isolated event. Disruptions are increasing in frequency and in magnitude. And this also includes various geopolitical events, climate related disasters, and public health issues, all beyond our control. A clear understanding of risk can help organizations establish the right plan in the face of the unexpected. With this, let's get started with the panel introductions. We have Kajal Gaikwad.
Hello Dhiraj, good evening everyone.
Good evening. And Kedarnath Lalwani,
Thank you for having me.
pursuing MMS in Finance from VESIM School. While on the other hand, we have Pradnya Bapat.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Sneha Patil
Hello, everyone.
and Abhishek Shirke,
Good evening, everyone.
pursuing MMS operations from VESIM School. Getting started with the discussion, in today's competitive world, the corporates are looking forward for global expansion in order to increase their profits and to reduce their costs. While pursuing their endeavors of global expansion, the corporates face various challenges such as statutory regulations, currency fluctuations, tariffs, etc. I invite Sneha to share her insights on these challenges faced by the corporates in their journey of global expansion.
I completely agree with you, Dhiraj. Corporates do face lots of challenges while expanding globally. In an increasingly globalized competitive world where margins are under constant pressure, supply chain optimization is critical. Though modern supply chains are complex, their supply chain risk profile have been altered significantly. The reason being that today's global supply chains constitute of cheap labor, network of suppliers, subsidized financing opportunities, and serves large markets. The governments of different countries also provide tax abatements to corporates and create sanctuaries for their operation. Hence, corporates venture globally as return of investment is high when compared to the challenges faced by the global corporates. So let me explain with an example of Apple. So Apple assembles 90% of its products in China. Virtually all the world's iPhones are made in China primarily by Foxconn's Hon Precision Industry at its so-called iPhone City and by Pegatron Corporation at an assembly site near Shanghai. So suppliers from different parts ship their components to assembly base in China. According to New York Times, the number of workers operating in China's manufacturing plant is approximately 230,000 and the figure is nearly equal to population of 83 cities in US. The reason for manufacturing in China is obvious, that is the low labor cost. Along the raw material required for manufacturing is also procured from China and the countries nearer to China. Besides the labor and raw material, Apple pays a corporate income tax of 35% to US government on profits made from products manufactured and sold in US. So, Apple just pays only 2% as of tax to foreign assets for products assembled in China. However, China has provisions of taxes as low as 15% for qualified high-tech companies. This has helped Apple to save $56.9 billion Apple also focuses on its long term strategic planning and ensures that the logistics is able to support the requirement of timely deliveries, especially when they are going to unveil their new products. And we also know that due to this pandemic, Apple's supply chain is drastically impacted as Foxconn had to shut its operations.
Absolutely, Sneha. Apple was definitely hit by this pandemic, but the investors trust Apple's leadership and trust their focus on the long term success. As a result of Apple's stocks and valuations have hit records high even as the broader economy is down to new depths. On one side, the corporations are trying to efficiently handle these global challenges in uncertain times, while on the other side, they also look at ways and means to reduce their operating costs and to maintain their margins. Having said this, Kedarnath on how corporates can work on managing their supply chain finance.
Sure. So before getting into supply chain finance, let's understand the number of players we have in supply chain. So we have suppliers, we have manufacturers, we have distributors, we have retailers. But at the end of the day, everyone is either a buyer or a seller. Now, from supply chain finance definition perspective, it's a set of solution that optimizes cash flow by allowing businesses to lend in their payment to their suppliers while providing the option for the suppliers to get paid early. Now, supply chain finance is also known as reverse factoring or supplier finance. Let me give you an example on the same. Now, imagine there's a supplier who supplies tires to this car manufacturing company. Let's name that company as X. It's an MNC. Now, that supplier plays a very small role in just supplying tires. When supplier delivers the tires to the buyer, he gives the invoice, he gives the credit period of 30, 60, or 90 days to the MNC to pay back the money as the orders are in huge volume. Now let's imagine the supplier gets a new buyer in next 10 days named Y, an MNC2. Supplier is happy. He's getting a new business, right? So he goes to X as he feels that there's not enough cash with him and there's working capital management issue. So he goes to X and he asks for early payment. But X is like, sorry, I can't help you as the distribution of my cars has just started. Now it's going to take at least 15 days from here, and supplier gets very angry and he leaves. Now there are two issues that we see here. First is cash crunch, and second is working capital management issue. And third potential problem is the relation between the supplier and the manufacturer. Now all these issues can be solved through supply chain finance. Now supply chain finance or SCF helps the seller in paying the money early by discounting some amount as fees, which is very minimal. And at the same time, the bank gets approval of the payment from the buyer, as it's the buyer that's going to pay the SCF company after 30, 60, 90 days if the supplier wants the payment early. Now, the most important point is that the buyer must have a good credit rating, as it's the buyer's credit rating on which the supplier is going to get benefits. As I said, that he's going to pay at the end. So the whole process goes like this. The supplier submits an invoice to the buyer. The buyer approves the invoice and uploads it on the supply chain finance platform. The supplier selects an invoice for early payment. Financer receives the approval from the buyer and processes request and provides early payment to the supplier. Once the invoice has matured, the buyer is instructed to pay to the financer. Now, since 2010, supply chain finance revenue has grown at a 5% CAGR as per Oliver Wyman, a consulting firm. As per PwC reports, consumer goods, transportation, and manufacturing are the three major areas where we have seen these companies using SCF the most. And from region perspective, we can see this facility being used the most in Northern and Southern Europe, which comes around 73% of the overall global market. But the biggest issue here is that SCF is well known with the MNCs, but small medium businesses still don't know if this thing exists. Now, from COVID perspective, as Dhiraj is also spoke about COVID. So, as per Prime Revenue, a working capital finance solution company, suppliers want to supply as much as they can, and they want the money to be paid as soon as possible to roll their cycle. But they are not able to do that, right? But buyers also know that if they help, then the whole process can smoothen down, and hence they are taking help of the SCF, and they are going as a team to the supplier to help the supplier, and the whole process is smoothing. So even though COVID is still alive, buyers and suppliers are keeping their ammunition loaded and are ready to fire.
So true, Kedar, and thank you so much. I agree with the awareness that MSMEs aren't aware about it, but they have to be aware because they are mostly into the optimizing their working capital and help them, which will help them in investing more in their business to be productive, to be more productive, and supply goods or services at competitive prices to anchor companies, thereby which will help them to increase their contribution to the economic development. As explained by Kedar, though corporates have to manage their cash flows, they also have to deal with other risks which are beyond their control and affect their profits. These risks can be due to economic uncertainties. Kajal, how do we manage such risk, particularly the risk arising from economic uncertainties and exchange rates, as their specific risk drastically impacts the global supply chains?
Very true, Dhiraj. Economic uncertainties are very hard to plan, and their damaging effect can have a serious implications on global companies. Economic uncertainty has a greater impact on companies' financial status and can also lead to currency devaluations in that country. It is absolutely crucial that while deciding to foray in a global operations, the corporate must undertake an intensive research and list risk and plan their remedial actions before they commence their global operations in that country. Look at Brexit. No one ever thought about that the UK would exit from European Union. This development has caused lots of changes in the global businesses environment, like higher manufacturing costs and higher prices for consumers, all due to new set to rules for taxes and tariffs, safety standards, and movement of people and goods. With respect to exchange rate, we have to always remember that any exchange rate shift should be at the forefront of a business risk assessment plan. It is important that companies understand the impact of currency fluctuations on the major problem faced by one of the major problem faced by the global businesses is buying in a currency with high valuations and then selling in a weaker currency. Any strong changes affecting their currency will impact the profit margins. There are also other challenges to be faced when currency changes have to be adjusted for differences in inflation as well as mismatches between the cost and investment in one currency and revenues in another. However, it is not always easy to predict exchange rate changes. There are risk management tools which can help businesses to understand currency risk and how the exchange rate fluctuations can distort the value of the company. The corporate should fully understand their portfolio structural and transactional risk. Every risk will impact value and cash flow in a different way. So each type of risk will require different risk management approaches.
Thank you, Kajal. Brexit has definitely impacted the rules of doing business between UK and the European Union. Moving to the next dimension of this uncertainty, that is technology. There has been quantum leap in the adoption of new technologies by the company. There are huge investments in digitization in supply chain as it contributes in improving supply chain resilience and flexibility. Pradnya, what is this digitalization and do you think it can help the businesses to deal with the supply chain uncertainty?
Dhiraj, digitization in supply chain is all about data transparency across the company's ecosystem as it facilitates synchronized demand and supply planning, as well as aids in connected and transparent logistics. It requires usage of artificial intelligence to self-connected orchestrate the key activities of supply chains. The usage of artificial intelligence allows the businesses to spot relevant patterns and adopt a more proactive approach to managing risks. As per the PwC Global Report, the companies who have invested in digitization of their supply chain have reported a 6.8% reduction in supply chain costs and 7.7% increase in revenue for last year. Let's consider digital twins, which works closely alongside the other high-level technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IoT, commonly called as Internet of Things. So the concept itself is not exactly new, What is new is the use of IoT, that is Internet of Things technology, to continually feed the data into the digital twin in real time. Having a virtual replica of the supply chain allows the companies to carry out accurate testing of different scenarios, such as, for example, how switching a supplier might help to mitigate the possible impact of a global pandemic. With the ability for the model to respond to the new real time data, companies that are able to exploit this technology spend less time in crisis mode and instead develop mitigative strategies. According to a research by BCG, the use of digital twin can lead to 5% reduction in the inventory and 10% reduction in capital expenditure. In the current pandemic, supply chain management has become increasingly important. This is due to the multiple layers of the supply chain and number of partners required for acquiring, producing, and delivering a product or a service. Digital twin technology is one of the new technologies that global companies can adopt, as it is shall help the businesses to understand and manage the supply chain risks.
Thank you so much, Pradnya, for explaining us the digital twin technology and its proven contribution in keeping global supply chains sustainable. Adding on to the same, there are many technological companies like IBM who offer diverse and vast portfolio of products and services, including artificial intelligence, IoT, cloud computing, and security. These technology-driven companies are assisting their business clients in transforming their business and helping the companies to be more engaged with their partners, clients, and employees in new manners. As agreed, the pandemic has impacted each and every company around the globe, forcing the companies to face tremendous challenges in their field of work. Let me give an illustration from the automotive sector. Tata Motors, a leader in Indian car segment, it sold 13,865 units domestically, registering a decline of 88%. I invite Abhishek to elaborate on the recent issues the companies are undergoing and the risk that the companies might face in their supply chains due to this worldwide trade lockdown.
Yeah, so first of all, at the outset, I would like to state that the COVID-19 outbreak has a profound impact on our industries and the institutions, as you just mentioned, that are actually integral to our modern life. What makes the impact of COVID-19 so remarkable is in the way it is affecting every single aspect of the supply chain, which is complicating both upstream and downstream supply lines. So the companies are having trouble acquiring the material which is needed to make products, and they are struggling to ship their products to stores and wholesalers, to the retailers, and so on. Unlike other disruptions, COVID-19 is impacting virtually every single aspect of supply chains. COVID-19 has brought to the forefront more than any event in the last several decades, and that is the importance of supply chain management. Businesses have to understand that this extended lockdown is very much different from a one day disruption. The difference may be divided into two sides, that is supply side effects and the demand side effects. At Kedar also side there is a buyer and there is a supplier. So on the supply side, continuous processes like steel manufacturing, if once closed down, take some time to restart. Tata Steel slumped down to 22.8% as a pandemic has impacted their supply chains. Similarly, other economic activities that are very much labor intensive cannot restart instantaneously if a substantial part of labor is migrant and has returned to their hometowns due to the pandemic. Now, if the manufacturers have shed the jobs or have deducted salaries as a consequences of the cutback in production, which is necessitated by the lockdown, the companies may reopen with lower levels of production and thus employ less labor than they had prior to the lockdown. As the industry looks to restart, the companies are taking measures in plants and warehouses to avoid further spread of the virus. These measures include running production lines at a slower speeds, assigning workers to designated work areas, and which is the most important, sanitizing equipment between the shifts. The companies which were focused on cost efficiency will shift their focus on building resilience, contingency plans, and also the risk assessment into the supply chains. Part of the focus includes reshoring, that is, moving production back into the same country, as opposed to outsourcing or offshoring production. According to the Chris Hayden, who is the president of SAP Procurement Solutions, the companies will begin analyzing and understanding key bottlenecks in their supply chains. Most importantly, the outbreak allows companies to evaluate their supply chain risk. As companies figure out how to conduct business in this environment, they also need to make sure that their rebuild is sustainable. There are many companies who have filed for bankruptcy. So, Dhiraj, as you have mentioned the automobile sector, I feel that reputed automobile companies such as Toyota, who is the pioneer of just-in-time concept, and Ford, the initiator of the lean manufacturing revolution, would need to revisit their concepts.
Abhishek, thanks for sharing your views. It's indeed a tough time for manufacturing companies, and they have to revamp their operations to cope up with these challenges. Further to Abhishek's views, COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the gaps in just-in-time principles. I would like to invite Sneha to share her views on the same.
Yes. Yes, Dheeraj. The just in time strategy was conceptualized to save huge amounts in terms of inventory cost and to provide high quality production. We can see during this pandemic phase that the traditional lean just in time supply chains were optimized for efficiency but not resiliency. According to a report by Institute for Supply Chain Management, the North American manufacturing was operating at 74% of the normal capacity, and the Chinese and European manufacturing were operating at 76 and 64% only. Therefore, we can say that a cost optimization can no longer be the only consideration in structuring our supply chains. We need supply chains that are built for resilience. So, Corona has made a realization to manufacturers to adopt the just in case strategy along with the just in time to make the supply chains resilient. So, let me give an example of Zara. So, Zara gives a very good example of a resilient just in time supply chain. The operational strategy of Zara is that a significant amount of its production is in house and it makes sure that its factories reserve 85% of their capacity. For rest of the production, the company relies on facilities nearby to its design headquarters in Spain. Zara produces 15 to 20% of its production line in advance, 30% of the production takes place at the start of the season, and whereas the majority chunk, that is the 15% production, is done in the middle of the season. The just in time implementation helps Zara to cope up with any new trend without making the inventory obsolete. On the receiver's end, also, store managers communicate customer feedback on what shoppers like, what they dislike, and what they are looking for. This data is instantly funneled back to Zara's designers who begin sketching on the spot, making the supply chain of Zara robust and quick. This in house production, exhibited with GIT supply chain, helps Zara to be flexible in the amount, frequency, and variety of new products that they want to launch.
Thank you so much, Sneha, for sharing your inputs on the importance of building resilient supply chains. Having said that, as the outbreak has affected the working of the businesses and this has led to an increase in their expenditure and eroding their profits, Kedar, being from the finance background, please suggest some remedies for global companies facing these financial crunches.
So before giving you all the solution, let me add on some problems which we have seen. So we have always heard that rich people are getting richer and poor people are getting poorer, right? It's the same thing with the supply chain finance area. Now we have seen suppliers facing the issue of higher interest rates because they have less resources, and all the MNCs having all the resources are getting financing at a lower interest rates. Now, Australia's Small Business Ombudsman issued a report this year claiming some corporates and SCF providers were forcing the financing program on their suppliers in order to extend payment terms, meaning MNCs or corporates are financing or finding ways to delay payment, but SMEs are facing the heat. Another issue which we saw was paperwork. So the whole paperwork in the SCF is time consuming, and the overall process is getting digitized, but all the things are in process. One of the biggest SCF option for corporates have been Standard Chartered, and as per them, they have seen issues of frauds. Now, traders provided the same invoices to multiple banks in order to secure double financing. Uh, I would like to add on one more example here. So there's this apparel company called Gap that saw a downfall of around 43% of its sales in its first quarter, as there was no logistic assistance to deliver products from place of production to place of consumption. And local stores were facing issues like products being out of stock and consumers getting disappointed with very less options available. Now, it's during these times that the whole process of supply chain is facing a problem. Supply chain finance should help the company if it faces any cash crunch. Now, one of the solutions suggested by Atul Patel, a co-founder of DLT Ledgers, world's largest cross-border trade digitization platform, was that the big companies can create their own supplier finance platforms to support suppliers with the participation of multi-lending partners to build competitive supply chain ecosystem challenges. Now, by saying big companies creating their own supplier finance platform, it's like car companies giving an option of financing to their customers for buying cars. Now, this way, SCF firm will be an in-house firm and the overall process may speed up. In these tough times, we can see some positives like push towards getting paperwork digitized, which will reduce the overall time, and the negative side we are witnessing are frauds. Holistically, it's been a mixed bag of the overall system.
Thank you so much, Kedar, for suggesting few remedial steps that the global businesses can take to cope up with these financial crunches. We know that technology plays a major role in any type of business decisions. More and more companies are adopting to blockchain technology, which is one of the key innovative technologies bringing out a change in digital supply chain management. Pradnya, I request you to kindly share your opinion on blockchain technology and its role in building a resilient supply chain.
Yes, rightly said, Dheeraj. Blockchain is a technology that enables the users to store the data in a decentralized way. It does not rely on a single database but uses distributed ledgers, distributed storage opportunities, and then stores them into the blocks into the overall network. Since every transaction is recorded on a block and across the multiple copies of the ledger that are distributed over many nodes, nodes can be referred to as the systems or computer systems that every stakeholder possesses. It is highly transparent. It is also highly secure since every block links to one before it and after it. The advantage is that the information is available multiple times in the network, which means that it cannot be easily changed. It's immutable, it's trustworthy, and can be used by many parties. According to Gartner, the business value add of blockchain is expected to exceed $3.1 trillion by 2030. We will see one example, where amazing example of blockchain application in food industry. As in food industry, it is imperative to have solid records to trace each product to its source. So Walmart recently has been working with IBM on a food safety blockchain solution to add transparency to the decentralized food supply ecosystem by digitizing the food supply chain process. They created a food traceability system based on Hyperledger Fabric, the open source ledger technology. Walmart uses blockchain to keep the track of its pork, its sources from China, and blockchain records where each piece of meat came from, processed, stored, and its sale by date. Unilever, Nestle, Tyson, and Dole also uses blockchain for similar purposes. The diamond giant De Beers uses blockchain technology to track stones from the point they are mined up right up to the point where they are sold to the consumers. This ensures the company avoids conflict or blood diamond issues and assures the consumers that they are buying the genuine article. So blockchain is surely going to change the face of global supply chain.
Thank you so much, Pradnya, for explaining us the ways in which global businesses are leveraging blockchain technique to enhance the supply chain resilience even in the times of increased risks and uncertainties. But can it be said that the consolidation makes supply chains to withstand or recover quickly from different conditions? I would like to invite Sneha to share her views on the same.
Yes, Dheeraj. You can see that during this COVID phase, companies have been undergoing the strategic consolidation in order to preserve liquidity to deal with the market uncertainty. So, companies do consolidation of supply chains as it reduces the risk and uncertainty prevalent in the market. It reduces the focus of companies by reducing the supply chain entities such as suppliers, distributors, etc. This is done to avoid internal ramification. The improved predictability and transparency can result into better compliance and improved relationship with suppliers. Let me explain this with the help of an example. So Boeing has recently confirmed that it will be consolidating production of the Boeing 787 aircraft and moving it to South Carolina in 2021. So let me explain this. Earlier, the manufacturing was at two places, that is at Washington and South Carolina. Now they are planning to focus production at single site as it will improve the operational efficiency during this time of market downturn and provide liquidity to the company for its liabilities. So this decision is an effect of estimated $84 billion losses the airlines industry is going to face in 2020. Let me remind you that companies also need to look into the risk associated with consolidation. According to a report by Ernst and Young, the risk associated with consolidation are failure in achieving synergies, inability to retain talent, and also the financial challenges. In the case of Boeing, several analysts have discord with the company's decision. According to them, shifting manufacturing plant will affect supply chain and also might lead to production issues as their production base in South Carolina has faced many production flaws in the past also.
I completely agree with that. That condition has has its own pros and consequences, and business have to take a calculative risk. During this lockdown, number of companies have challenges in terms of reduction in profits, increase in costs, and a drop in sales. Abhishek, I request you to kindly suggest some strategies that the global corporates can implement in order to overcome the challenges in supply chain management.
The pandemic has struck various industries, but not all to the same level of damage. In the industries such as the auto, travel, and consumer goods, as well as electronics and retail, have been profoundly impacted. The emphasis on driving production efficiency, strong yield, and high quality is even more important, and many companies have reduced the capacity utilization due to the traffic limitation. Even after the reopening of the factories, most sites are still struggling to achieve even 50% of their previous capacity. Corporates are rebuilding their supply chain by focusing on responsiveness, resilience, and restorations, which are the three R's. Let me explain how companies are successfully using these strategies. For instance, Mahindra and Mahindra surprised the global market with a better than expected margin performance, despite the fact that the automobile sector has witnessed many challenges from the beginning of 2020. They prepared a strategic action plan for its different subsidiaries. Like Mahindra divided the subsidiaries into A, B, and C. A consisted of companies which had a clear path and a greater than 18% of return on investment with great potential in future, like considering its tractor business where Mahindra believed that the rural recovery will be much more faster than the urban recovery, which is a huge trigger for Mahindra as it is a very significant exposure to the rural markets. It shifted its supply chains resources in this sector, that is the rural sector, and responded quickly to the dynamic changes. The second one is Motherson Sumi, which is a world-leading automobile parts manufacturer and supplier, resiliently overcame the pandemic shock with its global presence of over more than 270 facilities worldwide in different countries. The company is surprisingly working at 100 to 120% capacity now. because the company's ideology is very clear. That is, if its exports to a country increases to more than 10%, the company would rather open a separate branch in that nation itself. Motherson is now also planning into unrelated diversification using its strength and expertise in this field. Talking about restoration, the airline industry has been very much affected, and many airlines across the world are nearer to bankruptcy, as we see in the news daily. But one of the exception is the Southwest Airlines from USA, which was at the first quarter was very worst affected after the lockdown restrictions. After that, it saved itself from bankruptcy by adapting point-to-point air routing rather than hub and spoke route system, which is used almost by every airline, its competitors as well. Moreover, it does not pursue a multiple fleet strategy like the other airlines. Instead, it concentrates on one kind of aircraft. This is in complete contrast to the legacy carriers who source their aircraft from a multitude of manufacturers. The single fleet strategy allows Southwest to curtail its post-sale cost by reducing the amount spent on servicing and maintenance. All this helps Southwest Airlines to restore its second position with increase in market share from almost 14.3% to 16.7%. The pandemic has also highlighted the role of additive manufacturing. Supply chains are showcasing singular resourcefulness and adaptability, though the challenges are far from over. Speed in sensing and responding will help the firm overcome the unexpected supply problems. Failure to sense could lead to failure to respond to the vast changes in supply chain and can force a company to exit a specific market.
Thank you so much, Abhishek, for your wonderful insights. I am sure these are the key strategies which will help the global businesses to build a more resilient supply chain. Considering the various techniques and strategies in managing supply chain disruptions, I would request Kedar to disclose some insights in the future of supply chain finance post this pandemic.
Sure. So, some minutes back, Pradnya explained us about blockchain, and you won't believe that it is the future of supply chain finance. It plays a really important role. So, as per blockchain think tank 101 interview, pandemic disrupted around 59% of supply chain very severely. As per VP of IBM, there are three main areas where there are problems in supply chain finance. First is visibility, second is process optimization, and third is demand management. And blockchain provides a systematic way to solve these issues. Now, IBM and Indian MNC Mahindra announced a partnership in November last year towards developing blockchain applications for better, more efficient supply chain financing among India's SMEs. According to IBM, this will be the first supply chain finance blockchain enabled project in India. Now, aim is to create a common platform for supply chain finance for Mahindra's finance suppliers to manufacture transactions, allowing all parties to view transactions in real time, driving trust and transparency through supply chain. All in all, we can say that there's a positive flow of let's make supply chain finance better through blockchain. And in coming years, we will see the process getting more digitized and more smoother than what it is today.
Thank you so much, Kedar. So, with this, we come to the end of the discussion. To summarize the day highlights of this discussion, the COVID 19 outbreak has exposed just how vulnerable far flung supply chains have become. The frequency and intensity of shocks to the global economy are increasing. What long passed for adequate flexibility is now best positioned to weather the next event that obstructs the global flow of due to paucity of time. There are many questions which have been pouring in into the chat box, but due to the paucity of time, we are not able to address all responding to all the queries to the earliest. Before we wrap up with the event, I would like to thank our panelists and our faculty mentor, Dr. Kavita Nambar, without whom this panel discussion wouldn't have been possible. Special thanks to Dr. Satish Mode, the director of VESIM Business School, for his constant support and motivation. On behalf of our team and VESIM B School, I thank you all for making out time and joining us this evening. It has been a pleasure to host this event and wish you all a pleasant day. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear masks. Thank you.